The views, opinions, and representations expressed on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network and its website are those of the hosts, guests, and participants, and are not necessarily those of or endorsed by the network, its affiliated stations and broadcasts, the management, other hosts, or advertisers of the network. The shows found on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network can, but do not necessarily, promote any particular lifestyle, belief, religion, political affiliation, or other personal practice. These shows are for entertainment purposes only, and are not intended to treat, diagnose, and or claim any cure of disease or condition, or give any medical or legal advice. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
Well, that is me, and boy, one more day and the week is gone, over with. Then it starts again on Sunday. Well, I hope everybody's starting to see spring. I know here we've had a couple nice days. I'm going to go get my motorcycle out next week, get it all cleaned up and getting ready to start riding again. Miss riding that bike. Well, tonight, you better get yourself a cup of Java or a cup of hot cocoa. Find a nice comfy chair to get next to a fireplace or something, because tonight we're going to be talking about cryptics. We're going to be talking about Mothman and monsters with a repeated guest by you guys wanting him back so much, Tobias-Wayland. He'll be on right after this.
Please check out the Night Dreams Talk Radio website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Also, if you want to keep our show free of advertising, just hit the donate button. Give $1 or $2. Remember, all prior shows are always free to listen to. We at Night Dreams Talk Radio thank you for your support.
Well, Tobias, how's your week been for you?
Hey, so far so good, Gary. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, yeah. Well, blame it on the listeners. They really like, they like cryptics. They like Mothman. They like Dogmen, and stuff like that.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that. Really for the last, boy, it's hard to believe, but for the last 2 years, we've had this ongoing case of Mothman type sightings around Lake Michigan. So it's kind of taken over a little bit. And as it's developed as a story, I've seen a real resurgence in interest in the phenomenon, and obviously I think that's great. I think that for a long time people have been sort of reluctant to talk about these real weird sightings, really any sort of cryptid sighting outside of, say like Bigfoot or skunk apes or something. People didn't really want to come forward because I don't think that they understood how, I don't want to say common, but, just how often, I guess, people had these experiences. And it's quite a bit more often than most people think.
Oh, yeah, because, like I was telling you before we went on the air, Joe Taylor was on our show, 2 weeks ago. And he's the type of guy, he's a scientist, he goes out and finds dinosaur bones and stuff like that. And he actually has a museum there in Texas, displaying all these, bones from all these various dinosaurs. But a couple of weeks ago, one of his friends came up to him and said, hey, this lady ran into a Mothman. And it's like the second time that it supposedly happened to this lady over a period of a few years. But she was driving, and all of a sudden, she ran into a Mothman. And she thought it was something else. She gets out of her car, and this thing is standing at her, staring at her. And, she started screaming at it. It didn't even really pay attention to her. All of a sudden, it kind of put its wings out and just took off.
That is wild. So, now did he, when he was talking to this witness, did he ask about damage to the car, or, does anybody have some documentation, photographs, something? Yeah,
I guess, too, the fender was damaged on the side where she hit it.
Right. As you would expect, right? You've hit this man size or larger. Often, people will report this thing or these things, I would think. At 7 to 8 feet tall, you hit something like that with your car, and you're going to feel it, right?
Oh yeah, and supposedly an ugly humanoid face. So I mean,
that's. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead, sir.
Oh, sure. No, I was just going to say it's interesting that you mentioned the face specifically too. Now, was there a lot of detail given on the face? Because often, I've found that lacking in reports that I'll receive, and I think part of it has to do with sort of the brevity of the sightings. They're just over so fast. People don't get a lot of fine detail. But yeah, I mean, if it's possible, I would love to hear more about any of the creature's description, anything like that.
Well, I also will email you his phone number, and you can actually talk to him.
Oh, that'd be great.
He'd be more than happy to tell you what he knows. Other than the eyes, kind of glowed. And, it was interesting when it went to fly off. The witness described it as, the wings area was more like the material, kind of almost looked like kind of cloth hanging type of muslin type of cloth, the membranes on it.
Huh. So I wonder if it looked, because that sounds almost artificial, so like the wings were constructed rather than, being sort of a natural extension of its body. So
I couldn't, say again, that's how she described it. Again, it could have been, the wings could have had tears in it. I have no idea, but could you imagine going down a lonely road, and all of a sudden come up to a Mothman and hit it, and then you get out thinking, hey, I just hit a person, and then when you get out and you realize this thing is not a person, and it kind of like after a stare down, it took off. I mean, she was lucky because, who knows? I just remember like anything in Mothman in my mind reminds me of the Jeepers Creepers 2 movies,
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I mean, actually, that's a pretty common comparison. I've heard that one several times. Like specifically, that movie being referenced by witnesses as a way to describe what they saw, which it's interesting to me because you have to wonder, one, how much the movie influenced what they saw as far as like their mind filling in details, but then two, it's really interesting to me because some people might say, oh well, they saw this movie and then made it up, or they're saying things or something. But as a writer, it's really interesting to me to think about how people try to describe their experiences. Not everybody is a writer. Not everybody sort of has the same toolbox from which to work when it comes to describing their experience. And so, the use of these, sort of cultural, archetypes, if you will, I think is immensely useful in what we do. And, that is one specifically that I think they call him the creeper in, actual movie canon. Like that comparison to the creeper pops up, sort of time and time again, because we consistently get a description of a tall humanoid being with these huge leathery bat-like wings. Like we don't get a real fine level of detail all the time, because, like I said, the sightings are usually over so quickly, and they're often at night, and nobody's expecting to see something like this, so it's not like they're prepared for it, and by the time their mind is done reeling from the shock of it all, it's been over for 10 seconds. And so the one very consistent physical aspect described by every witness so far, though, is these huge bat-like wings. And so when you were talking before about the witness, who had hit it with her car or something, and and I'll have to reach out to that investigator and kind of get the skinny on that story, but it was interesting to me because that was probably the first time of the sightings that I've personally had reported to me or have investigated myself. That's probably the first time I've heard anything deviate from the description of huge bat-like leathery wings. So who knows? And again, like people, you can get 10 people describing the exact same thing, and you'll get 10 different, wildly different descriptions of it. So. Oh
yeah. Well, one thing, it would be interesting if somebody could get a hold of, the people when they made the movie, the people who designed the costumes for, the Jeepers Creeper movie for the creature. I'm just kind of wondering, maybe, when they were designing that outfit, making him look like whatever he did, maybe they took all these reports of Mothman, and that's how, they formed that creature in Jeepers Creepers. It could be the other way around, not people seeing the movie and then all of a sudden the creature looks like from the movie. It could have been the other way around.
Honestly, that's a really good point. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I hadn't considered that. I think you're absolutely right. I think that if you look at the depictions of monsters in most movies, frankly, I guess now that I'm really thinking about it, they do draw on folklore, if nothing else. But yeah, I would be interested to know the level at which, a culture influenced, the design of that particular monster.
I don't know. What we're talking about, a lot of, I gave it a lot of thought, since we talked about Mothman back maybe a couple